Hey, Bob, can you hear us?
Gotcha. Can you hear me?
We can. We are just waiting on the board members to get here. We do not have a quorum yet.
Okay.
We'll keep you in the loop.
Thank you, sir.
Mm-hmm.
Not, by the way, as I mentioned to you in past emails or texts, I think the audio and the visual is superb. I mean, it's great.
Well, remember that the next time my performance review comes up.
Yes, sir. No problem. The only thing, and by the way, I guess the equipment is so sensitive that even when somebody doesn't put on their microphone, you could still hear them. You can hear them from somebody else's microphone, but that's just always a reminder. We've got to tell folks.
Mm-hmm.
You evidently fixed.
Hey, try now.
Like I said, you fixed whatever was wrong with those emails because I got your one today.
I think they're all
about,
off right now.
Oh, I hadn't done anything to it, so it must have fixed itself.
well, maybe, you sent out that thing about Marvin Day or whatever it was.
Oh, yeah.
And it didn't look like that other one.
I'm not sure. Well, we'll give this a few minutes and then we'll go from there. Hey, Bob, we're still waiting on a quorum, just letting you know. We have 3 now, we need 1 more.
You know, they change names like they do.
Like, I know a girl.
All right, a quorum is present.
You're making a habit of this, you know that.
Now you made it, now we can start.
I have a baby now.
You have a dog?
He met her,
Yeah.
little puppy, and she was going nuts, and my wife was not at home, so I had to get her put up.
You're fine, you're fine. All right, let's get this party started. Lord, Lord, Lord.
What are these? Leftover from some other gift?
Probably Kim.
We threw some candy out for a meeting. I don't remember which one. You can take it. A few more. I don't need that.
You'll be calling Sean.
I had them, and I saw you wearing one, I thought,
Sean's still there? I thought he left. They've been getting mixed up.
The other one.
We are good to call this to order whenever you're ready. We're running a little behind, about 10 minutes so far.
Well, we're trying to eliminate some stories in some sections so that we can be on time and quick.
All right, I don't know. Is that done?
Reconvening.
All right, so we are reconvening the Marvin Planning Board meeting from Tuesday, February 20th. We now have a quorum. We are missing Marcus, Will, Mike. No, just kidding. Marcus, Marcus, Rich, Mike.
That's it.
That's it. All right.
So we ready?
So we'll turn it over to you, sir.
All right, so we will continue our Marvin Development Ordinance discussion. Tonight, we're going to be going back over the articles from last month, which is mainly Article 8. There's also a new Article 8 either in your binder in front of your, or right there in front of you. I'll let Rick kind of go into that, but in short, it's basically the changes of kind of bringing in the Heritage District as a zoning district, specifically in this, so everything's in one place. So we'll kind of go through that tonight, and as well as there was a replacement page in Article 9 that, if you left your binders here, we already did that. It was page 3 and 4. So other than that, I'll turn it over to Rick.
Thank you, Hunter. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board, the public. It's good to be here, and distinguished staff. It looks like Mr. Marino's by himself tonight over here on this side of the room. As Hunter pointed out, we've been working on getting Article 8 further down the road. So some of you may have had a chance to go through and have some questions, and we can tackle those in a few minutes, but just in case this addresses any of those questions, I'd like to point out that the new version, the version watermarked the 22nd of February, it has got some new material in it that begins on page 40. So this might shorten tonight's meeting. I don't know. It might lengthen tonight's meeting. I don't know. But it begins.
Is the whole chapter 8 replaced?
Yes, yes. The whole chapter 8 is replaced. Not the tables yet. The tables are in the works on polishing the tables. And so I'm going to go over with you what's happened to Article 8 since you've seen it first, and what I'm going to do next week to Article 8. And hopefully I'm heading in the right direction, and if not, y'all can reel me in. So if you'll notice, the Heritage District on page 1 of Article 8 has been added under the overlay districts, okay? And that's at the bottom in the list. And then beginning on page 40, well, there's a little description taken from the current form-based code that appears inserted on page 6. You'll see it highlighted in blue. And then on page 40, and this is the important part, from 40 until the end, which is page 64 at this time, so about 24 pages, we are bringing in what I'm going to call the meat of the Heritage District Form-Based Code. And I'll talk about what's missing and why in just a moment. Now, just to give you a little introductions, everybody got 40, 41 laying in front of you there? I want to remind you of the color coding. The color coding is the blue is new, the black is not. Now, that means that that unhighlighted black ink area is straight from your current Heritage District Form-Based Code, with the exception that it is now codified, meaning it's numbered, there are sections, there are subsections, things of that nature, because it needs to operate like a legal document. And the actual form-based code ordinance that's separate has a lot of things like bullets or just a heading with an underline, you know, things that are very difficult to cite when you're communicating with someone and saying, hey, you need to look at section so-and-so or what have you. So that's what you're looking at there, beginning on page 40. Now, I have a version with me in my pocket.
Can I interrupt just for a second, Rick?
Sure.
I'm looking, I'm going to probably defer to Austin on this. Austin, I'm looking on my laptop, and I'm looking, I get to page 39 as I'm looking at, I guess it's the table of contents PDF number 3. Where would I find page 40?
In North Carolina. I'm just.
Yeah, Bob, the new Article 8, I got this morning from Rick. We worked on it yesterday, so it's only printed. I'll have to send you a digital copy.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Here,
All right, thank
I
you.
can,
Okay.
I'll email it to you right now if you want to pull it up.
Sure, thank you.
Forgive my joke.
There goes that evaluation comment you made earlier.
Yeah,
So I have, if we need it and need to load it up on screen or anything like that, I have your current form-based code ordinance that shows what was carried over. So some things are not in this black ink that were not carried over, and I'll explain that in just a few moments. But I have that highlighted so you can see in my version of your form-based code what was transported and what was left out. But I'm going to give you a summary of what was left out. And we're going to start on this first page 40, and let me just use that as an example. where I have the intent paragraph, I took the paragraph that talks about the intent from your current ordinance, but there was also some other narrative that was a little bit on the general narrative format, and it really did not contribute to your purpose statement or your intent statement, which are important, okay? And so there's material that's not out of those 60 pages that I put into this 24 pages. Now, here's why. This is the part I wanted you to really get your arms around. Some of the material in your current form-based code, Heritage District form-based code ordinance really needs to be in the small area plan, because it's value statements and general observations and lots of shoulds and think about it's and stuff like that, and it's not really legal document material. And what that will enable you to do is, and so I'm not getting rid of the material, it just needs to be moved into its proper place. When you do a rezoning, a zoning map amendment, one of the things that you do is you reference the plan for consistency. That's where those things need to be said and stated, okay, because they don't offer any guidance at the enforcement or applicability level. They inform the decision to zone or not to zone that way. So that's why it needs to be over there. Any type of value statement or anything like that.
Sorry, I was gonna just jump in, and so this kind of, Rick and I discussed this, and we worked through all this yesterday, and this is, if you guys recall, one, why we did the small area plan in the first place, but two, that kind of what I was mentioning Tuesday night is like, this is where after this is adopted, and one, with the small area plan, we're gonna kind of do it concurrently, or at least so we don't lose anything. But an example of that would be, like, I think in the small area plan, it says like no driveway access or something off of the Meadowlark Lane. Like, that's hard to put in the regulatory part, but you put that in the plan, and then, for example, if a certain property goes for rezoning, and on their site plan, they are proposing that, then that is something the planning board can then either, one, make that recommendation not to do that, but also part of your recommendation is that it's inconsistent with those parts of the plan or whatever it is. And so that's where we're taking a lot of the narrative aspects that are in the form-based code and going to update and put them into the small area plan, which is part of the land use plan, which is what you guys will review, and once again, for consistency and all that, there in any rezoning, but specifically for the Heritage District.
So
May I ask a tech, sorry, go ahead,
My
John.
memory says it sure would have been nice if you were here when we were battling through
Good
the
Lord,
Heritage
yes.
District. I mean,
we're gonna get it
that
fixed
was-
now.
Yep.
that
Or the
was,
land use plan.
that was,
We'll get it
May I ask a
fixed now.
technical question? So in the small area plan, so the ordinances are
The law.
the law. The small area plan, while we would use that as a litmus to, what is up with the microphones tonight? We just keep
I know.
bumping them. As we would use them as a litmus tool to, for zoning, for a rezoning application, to see whether or not their application is consistent. Sorry, I process out loud, so you gotta stick with me. So their application is consistent with the small area plan or the land use plan, depending. Anything in, like, once it is able to be rezoned, then the small area plan is not legally binding, though.
Yes, it is.
Oh,
Article
it is.
1 still keeps it locked in, but it's not written in a regulatory way.
Okay.
So if
Can you
I may-
explain that a little bit more?
I will. And I want to explain it by using a little bit of an example first. Well, let me go ahead and explain, then I'll use the example. When you're doing a zoning map amendment, a rezoning, and you're determining consistency, and it's in a highly detailed situation like the Heritage District, then remember, we're positioning the legislative activity at the front end. Legislative meaning the rezoning at the front end. So if the development comes through the process and they're proposing and they're showing it with that driveway up there, it's not consistent, and you just vote no, you're done. If you go through the rezoning first, then you, in my opinion, you might end up with a lot of debate about the ordinance. It's saying this, but now I'm going to claim that you're now denying me access. So I've gained the rezoning, and now you're telling me I can't access that road. I've got more leverage. So I want to get all those critical decision-making into the very front end at the legislative level, because you do not need to justify a no vote on a rezoning.
Right, okay, so I'm remembering now, so especially with the ZEPSA plan, it's not like this is what we're thinking. It's like, no, they have to have it all spelled out up front to even get the rezoning.
Right.
And then that is the plan.
Correct.
Right, and then you're making a legislative, not an administrative determination.
Okay, all right, thanks for going
Legislative
back over that.
determination, an administrative determination, if I'm gonna keep drilling this in, is something that especially if it involves a subdivision, that can go straight to Superior Court. Okay? And any subjectivity is going to reflect poorly on the town. The only place you can use subjective decision-making is at the legislative level, which is the village council acting on whether they're going to change the ordinance or not, and that's what a map amendment is. So the rezoning to a sub-district in the Heritage District for a particular project would place that conditional district with that specific site plan. Everything would go into that actual ordinance, not into some approval or some permit, but it would be in the ordinance, okay? And if they do not propose that as guided by the plan, then it's not consistent, and just deny it, and that's it. The only thing that they can come back to you on is if you didn't do notices for the public hearing or some kind of procedural thing. Otherwise, a legislative decision is something that the council has the final say on, and that's it. There's no justification needed, other than it's not consistent, I vote no, period. It could even be consistent, they might decide we're not ready yet, and still vote no. And so your real ability to make certain that you get the outcome you're trying to get is to place more emphasis on the legislative decision-making, not the administrative determinations, which are site plan reviews and rejecting something because it doesn't meet one of the standards, which is all debatable, always debatable, especially as it might come into play with access or something like that. Is this starting to kind of sink in a little bit? Because it's a real change in your operating procedures from the past, where you've really zeroed in on the site plan as an approval authority of the site plan. We're going to move that, advance that up to the legislative role, so you're making a recommendation to the council. Council has final say on it or not, and if it meets the standards, because once they've zoned it, if it meets the standards, it meets the standards, or it doesn't meet the standards. But that's very easy to debate. You can get bogged down with appeals to planning board decisions. You can get bogged down with appeals to the staff decisions that go straight to Superior Court if it involves subdivision. That's a new part of the new 160D. Subdivisions can bypass and hit the fast lane. That's another reflection of basically the North Carolina Home Builders Association lobbying efforts to not unnecessarily hold up development. But the emphasis needs to be on achieving what you're trying to achieve as the leadership in a community. You don't have to exercise that. You can rezone faster and move it along as you want to, but you also can hold up a project and say, no, you know what, this is not fitting with what we're trying to accomplish, without getting into the ordinance, doing it at the plan level. So to me, I would put all the value statements, all the general guidance, even some of the statements like the road access or something like that over there in the plan, and that way it's part of the legislative. Have I said it enough? Legislative, legislative, legislative. So So that's where that is. Now, any yellow you see in here is language that we need to go back and figure out. It's discussion stuff and things like that, and we can do that after you've had a chance to look at this. It's still language from your ordinance today, but it's things that I saw that caused me to highlight them. And we can go through those after you've had a chance to look at them. But as you flip through, you'll see some things that, and I'll come back and we'll pick a couple of them out to pick on in a minute for you to take a look at. Like I said, the blue is new language or corrected language. The yellow is things where I see, I don't want to call it a red flag. I would rather call it maybe it's something that could be a potential unintended consequence. It could generate an unintended consequence, and that we might need to tighten more, okay? So just sort of flipping through the pages, you'll see how that works. One of the things that I saw in there that's in yellow on page 50, you've got this Marvin Heritage District Review Board. I really strongly recommend that not be a separate thing, that the planning board be the central component for things that are moving through those pipelines, and not have some other group that's involved in certain projects, but not all projects. The planning board is involved in all of them. Let's stay focused on that ball. So I recommend that
As I recall, that was that was a major conversational aspect when we were writing the original.
And what we,
As far as whose responsibility and who has what responsibility.
and we, Austin can attest this, is basically we knew that it was in the ordinance, but it did say or. And so we never created that review board. We just kind of have given you guys that authority, and that's what it's going to stay to be as well. Like, there's no use to create a separate committee just for that. I mean, I think the original intent of that is some of the long-term implications if this district does build out and successful as part of that, like a downtown development association type thing, like where more for the like commerce and certain things, not necessarily the yeah.
Now, if I could move your attention over, this is still just kind of giving you a little bit of orientation to the philosophical adjustments that I'm talking about. If you can move over to 54, 55, those pages, page 54 and 55 of the new draft of Article 8, you'll see a ton of color. The yellow, I want to resolve some issues in. The red is the red flag. Then I want to sort of call your attention to, and the green is also stuff that I'm going to be fixing. So yellow, we got to solve. Red is something that's on fire, and green is something I definitely know needs to be changed, and I'll walk you through those really sensitive ones real quick. That yellow stuff really bugs me a little bit. It's got rules that kind of get all over the place. And if you look at the pink at the bottom in item number, or letter F, as in Frank, if you look at the pink, you'll see what I mean. The first pink says, shall be encouraged. Now, just to give you a bit of an orientation, that means it is the law that Hunter and his department has to go encourage these people. Okay? That's what that says. And if he fails to do that, he's violating the town's own ordinance. If he fails to encourage them to do pedestrian connectivity. The second stretch of pink, I just don't even know how to pay homage to, and I'm sorry if I offend someone, but shortly down the road is not a standard. I'm sorry. I hope I don't know who I offended with this, and I apologize, but I cannot defend an interpretation of that phrase. Because my shortly and your shortly, and are we talking about distance or are we talking about time? I mean, okay?
There's also
So-
one on page 50, in clause B, in the drainage ditch section, it says, shall be required for a few feet to prevent accidents.
Which one are you on?
He's on the
Page 50,
drainage ditch
clause
stuff we
B.
talked about yesterday. That's
B up
highlighted.
there?
Like the third line. The shoulder shall be
Drainage-
required
the
for a
drainage
few
ditch.
feet.
Oh, yeah, that's why we've got that.
Yeah.
That's why we've got that highlighted in yellow. I've got to do some cleanup, and I'm not going to try to do it by committee tonight with everybody in the room, but I'm pointing out to you that the yellow, when you read this, is your current language that needs to be tightened, clarified, adjusted, whatever the proper thing is. Now, the third pink line is may be encouraged. But I don't know who does that. From the roundabout on it, may be encouraged to allow people to turn. May be encouraged to allow people to turn. You see where I'm going with this? Now, let's look at the green to the right on page 55. And I've been involved in a number of cases as an expert witness involving land development and what have you. And one of the things that concerns me is this one. This is an architectural thing. And we can do that. We can do certain architectural things in a form-based code. But this is one that bothers me significantly. You see the green in that maximum area of freestanding signs is calculated as 25% of the linear property frontage. It means that if I own a piece of property that's bigger than your piece of property, I have a greater right to speech than you do.
So just,
That's, to me, that's dancing with the constitutional free speech or equal treatment under the law. And it equates wealth or the control of property to your ability to convey a message. And that's extremely important now on the heels of the content neutrality Reed v. Gilbert case back in 2015, I'm thinking. That was a U.S. federal Supreme Court case in Arizona that dealt with content of signage. Okay, so the local government can't regulate my signage based on what I write on my sign. If I want to stick a yard sign out in my yard that says house for sale, or that says vote for me and I'll set you free, or that says whatever I want it to say, yard sale, whatever, we can't touch it. They have the same rights for that little sign based on what we establish for that district. If it's residential, we might say little ones for X number or Y number, but we can't get into what it says. We can't say yard sale signs have to be down in 3 days and for sale signs can be up for 6 months, because we're using the content to regulate. Now, when you put content together with the size of the sign, now you're regulating speech. And so that green on page 55 terrifies me. And it's a case that I've never seen before. It's not an existing case. It's a case I fear is coming down the road in the future. So I don't ever recommend tying sign size to architecture, even though from a style standpoint, it makes complete sense that it's proportional and what have you. But I'm nervous about whether or not that is a constitutional issue or not. And I'm not an attorney experienced in constitutional law or anything like that, but that is a red flag to me.
But it's not controlling, I'm trying to understand, it's not controlling content though, so when you say.
But it's how
You're-
much, if you've got this.
It's just size though,
And
you're
I
just
got
regulating size.
I agree. I'm saying because this is that's why I've got it in green, not in red. I just want to make sure you see my concern. Now, we've got this as a conditional overlay. Conditional districts can only be initiated by the property owner or their applicant, somebody on their behalf. It's what you call in your ordinance voluntary. In other words, they request it. the property owner or developer requests the overlay district or the conditional district. And so we could say, and we talked about this, we could say that they're agreeing to those limitations for architectural purposes. But I wanted you to know where I stand on that. I do not encourage that you use that as the way to regulate signage. And what concerns me is over time. In 25 years, when nobody remembers that it was a conditional district, and somebody calls town hall and says, hey, we've got a new business going into Unit A over here of this project, and we want to put up a new sign, and they're looking at the ordinance, and the ordinance in 2049 says, 18 square feet for each business, and we don't, because that's the problem with conditional zoning, is we're creating a district that has to now live forever. And it becomes an implementation nightmare. They get forgotten. New staff turns over, okay? Your granddaughter is here doing your job, Hunter, and you've long since retired. And she's a young planner right out of school, and she's in here, and she looks up the zoning district and looks up the stuff and says, yeah, 12, when in fact it might have been something else. So it always concerns me about putting signage privileges in a conditional district because it becomes a administrative inconsistency usually.
Yeah, so
How do you, let's say you've got I don't know if we've got any lots like this, but, well, maybe even your property. I'm just, because I was thinking of the smallest property. You've got a 100-foot lot, and he gets the same size as Farmer Fincher, who's got, 1,200 feet of road frontage.
That's right.
well, and that's what I was about to say is like, one, I personally think consistency would make sense. I think it would make it more uniform. You just set a standard, that's what they get, boom. I think it maybe even look better. The other thing you have to think about, to what Rick's saying with size of property, is if, let's say Tim comes to do a rezoning, has, these, mixed-use commercial buildings, has more signage, like development identification, like, project, like kind of like where Marvin Gardens at, where one of his tenants could put like restaurant or whatever, X restaurant. When then you have the Zepsa property that has smaller frontage, and then their tenants don't have the same availability to maybe advertise or whatever, so then they maybe jump ship from there and go across the street because they're getting advertisement there. So that's where I think it should be fair across the board, and I think it would honestly still look better in the long run in that way too.
And it also needs to be reasonable, and that's where it comes in with the council.
Read the green, that's right, that's where that master sign plan can help, but I believe let's let Article 17 drive that decision, because let's read that green sentence and then look at that model. That model has a very limited amount of street frontage, but the largest sign that they can have for that project is driven by that street frontage. But you've got multiple tenants, you've got a number of things you're wanting to try to do. My point on this is architecturally, it makes sense. Property control, just because I got more frontage means my sign's bigger. Does that mean my little store with 400 feet of frontage, but my little store gets a bigger sign than somebody's store that's bigger than my store that only has 120 feet of frontage, you see? Now, if it was tied to the size of the building, that's a little more defensible from an architectural standpoint, but it's tied right now to property control, not building architecture and things of that nature, which is normally what you see a form-based code do. I recommend that we completely can that in here and let Article 17 do the talking on it with the master sign plan option that they have for projects like that, where you then hold a hearing, you do all kinds of normal stuff, and it's final. It's a legislative approval. You see where I'm going with this? So there's stuff in here that I wanted to mention to you that I am very much advocating we revisit. And believe me, I'm on a fixed contract. I make more money if I don't dig up more issues. But that's not what I'm here for. I'm here to fix your ordinance for you. So I wanted you to see this and kind of understand the color coding, and I'm not going to go through and beat each one of these pieces to death. But I do want to back up to one page that kind of exemplifies a concern. If you look at page 46, you'll see blue, and you'll even see blue in the table. And blue in the table is changes from what your form-based code said that I'm suggesting be changed or added, and Hunter, and some of those things Hunter and I have discussed specifically that have been done since the version that I got. But if you flip the page back to 45 or even 44, you'll see yellow in the table. The yellow in the table is where my concern is. It deals with different lot things in the same district. So you have a large lot home / village house, a medium lot home, and a small lot home. If I wanted to be pretty sly, I would come in and I would do 100-foot lots I'd do 70-foot lots at 19,999 square feet. Having those ranges is going to create games. You really need to decide what is it in this district, and let that be it. Or what I do, and what I did in the T&D, which is already in your ordinance, is I don't specify. And let that be part of that application with that master plan for that rezoning to the Heritage District. So they say, over here we've got big houses, we're proposing X size lot, Y size setbacks, et cetera. On these other lots, we're proposing this and this and that, and then you get to weigh it and decide it, rather than ordaining something that you want to be conditional anyway, because this is just going to get played with here.
Well, would you not suggest giving them guidelines and then rather than just letting them come up with all their own numbers?
If you're going to then take this out and say these are examples as guidance in the plan. So there's the guidance. They might come back to you and say, well, we've got some acre lots that are 125 feet. You'd still be able to approve it as part of the legislative action. It's still generally consistent with that guidance. If you've got a standard in here, then we're taking out their ability to work with the site without having a numbers game going on. Let them test the site, let them figure out what works, and let them bring you something. And the numbers should generally be consistent with this, but from a regulatory standpoint, you see my point of I can do 42,500 square foot lots that are 100 feet wide. In other words, I'm bumping right up against the minimum size for the third category to take advantage of the category right below it with only the 10-foot side yard setback. So I'm doing acre lot with a 10-foot setback. If I go to 42,500 or 43,000 even, it's still pretty much an acre lot, but I'm only doing a 10-foot setback because I slid in under the max. So those brackets can backfire. That's what I called a little while ago the unintentional consequence. So when you read through this, the yellow means something I'm concerned about that I want us to, now's the time for us to fix it. Meanwhile, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to bring back another version of 8 that addresses what I think would be the right way to go on these. But I want you to be able to see where I'm going.
I'm just curious, would ranges of lot sizes be alternative?
still the
When you
same
just
concept.
mentioned about,
Let them, put them in the plan, and if they want to make that a part of their proposal for the conditional
just
district,
mentioned,
then
you know-
you've got the ability to consider that.
Right.
They might tie it down that way.
okay.
And Rick, I know you and I discussed, I mean, this is it's dealing with residential. We've already got the approved residential. So one thing that we kind of did discuss yesterday is actually, and just hang with me when I say this, just hold on, is take out the large lot and the medium lot, leave the small lot, and let that be the minimum standard since we already have it. And then it kind of still creates where that's the minimum, they can always go more than that. But at the same time, the land use plan and putting some of these other guidelines in those plans still will kind of regulate not having more residential at that size because of, we, one, already have that project, but two, we have like the density goal or still the overall, in the small area plan that the overall density for the district is still supposed to be at 1 house per acre. That's a recommendation. So like, where we don't have just 7 different subdivisions at quarter acre lots come be proposed, because that's where you guys deliberation would come in and the council's consideration, but that's one way that we could also do it.
Can you go back and clarify, so using the Jones Homes project as the minimum, just using it, okay, I see what you're saying.
So it'd basically just be the residential, in the RO district, the residential minimum lot size, setbacks, all that is what's in the small lot homes. And that's just that's just the minimum, because in theory, we've already got the residential only portion rezoned.
Yeah.
So.
It's going to need some PR around it to explain, like,
Yeah.
we understand what you're saying and that we have control and, there's also a percentage of
And like I said, either way,
Well,
even if we go with, staff's good with either way, because even if we go with Rick's and let them propose it, especially kind of at the mixed use level, the Jones Homes is already approved, it's tied in with the plan, it's in the development agreement on what their setbacks are. So,
The biggest thing, I think, that's the safety net to keep this in your, not to keep the table in your ordinance, but to keep this residential-only area spelled out in here, is I've seen projects go through entitlement, which is plan approvals, rezonings, all sorts of engineering and all kinds of other things, only to die on the vine because of the, bond markets or some other reason that the project doesn't go forward. And the zoning runs with the land. So it's going to stay, and so we want to keep this district, even if it's about to be consumed by this one project, we need to keep this sub-district in here, okay? You'll also have reasons to go back to it when somebody comes back later on and says, hey, we want to do a addition to the home, or we want to, change something about the property that we own, okay? So it's important to keep it in here, even though it's largely almost behind us in this first phase. Because things will crop up down the road. We know that. So with that said, let me see if there was anything major that I wanted to point out, because I want you to look through from page 40 on pretty carefully and see what you think about that. I'm proposing some more aggressive language on the PEV charging stations. That's over on page 53 than what you had. Given some of the things that are going on out there, the trends that are going on out there, and the level of acceptance in this community, I think you might want to look at that. And I believe, let's see, application procedures. Things like procedure stuff, we already have conditional zoning processes and procedures in our rezoning or zoning map amendment article. We already have development agreement processes and procedures in our Article 7 on processes and procedures for permits and development agreements and all that. So I didn't carry that substance over that would be repetitive. It's already in the ordinance. It's not unique to this district. It applies to all projects that meet certain thresholds and certain criteria.
Can I ask you a question on 53 about the charging stations? Is there a way to regulate what type of charging stations? Because
Well, I think right now what's headed our way in the market, on the market side, is now that they've standardized the ASE or something like that, has standardized the type so that everybody's going to be sort of going to like we use a standard 110 plug in this country now. They're standardizing that on the on the electric vehicle stuff, and it looks like it's going to be the Tesla version. Well, it doesn't look like they've done that, but it's probably going to take another year or two before everybody's just receiving that type of plug. I don't
So
know that
everybody
I
else
would.
is just out of luck if you have an electric car.
Pardon me?
So everyone else is just out of luck if you have an electric car? Because there's a lot more electric cars out there now.
There's,
that-
and some companies, I want to say now, they have the adapters
Yeah,
at,
they'll be doing a dash.
at the charging station. So
I don't
it's-
think that, I would put that in here because if it has to do with new homes anyway, the electrical inspectors, they're going to be looking at all those things. And so that's where those standards are going to really kick in, not at the land use level. Our requirement is that you have them. And the
Yeah.
electrical people are going to be looking at what standard that meets. And that new standard that's been adopted is going to be the ubiquitous. It's going to be everywhere after like 2025.
Yeah.
I
and-
didn't realize that there was a new standard that had been
Yeah.
adopted. I was just more worried about like a building owner deciding that they only want like a Tesla charging station, and so, no one
Well,
else.
and
like-
what Rick and I talked about yesterday on this, and, because we had one, I'm like, thinking about, yes, the socioeconomics of the community, and I probably guesstimated that maybe 1/5 of our residents probably have a electric car. It would be a benefit to potentially them, but as well as the economic impact of, if you're having these the restaurants or these businesses that we have this vision of, it also allows people to stop and spend money. So that's why I was like, hey, I think let's maybe up this, especially looking at some of the larger mixed-use tracts or commercial-only tracts that it maybe makes sense to do so. And it doesn't hurt. It's nothing on us, and if they get used, they get used, and if not, then
I think people will be fighting over them, actually.
yeah. So yeah.
Yeah, so this is moving in that direction. There are some of the manufacturers, suppliers out there right now, like ChargePoint is geared more towards destination stuff, so their infrastructure is more ideal for employers, more ideal for parking decks and things of that nature where people are going to spend a little time. When it comes to short-term stuff like restaurants and what have you, there are other companies out there that specialize in that more rapid charge and what have you. I used to joke a number of years ago, and in fact, I did PEV charging stuff in a zoning ordinance for the first time adopted for the first time in 2011 in North Carolina, and it was actually the first in North Carolina for a town, and it was used as a kind of a highlight of a number of things, because at the time there was a lot of air quality mitigation concerns with air quality in the greater Charlotte region. Okay, we've been considered a non-attainment community on air quality for a long time. It got better during the recession. During the COVID. During COVID, our air quality improved tremendously, and what have you. So I've been putting that in my ordinances, and there are companies out there that will actually make that available, and they make the money off of it in your parking lot. So if you were doing a new restaurant, you might not be the one that fronts the expense. You might be putting in conduit, but that's about it. There are vendors out there. Think of stopping at when you're traveling somewhere and there's a vending machine. DOT doesn't own the vending machines at the rest area. Or a Buc-ee's. Doesn't own the vending machines at that rest area. They let vendors do that work a deal to be the preferred vendor, and they split the take or however they do it.
Well, because technology moves so quickly,
Yeah.
is this, is a PEV charging station, are we, do we have the ability to update it if, because there's also a lot of talk, between people saying that I am a partial electric car, so I'm guilty, but that the batteries cause more damage, to the environment than coal does, and we're not going to get into that, but you know what I'm saying? That is an argument that's out there that it could end up backfiring eventually, and those cars might start going away, or
Exactly.
hydrogen, or now we're moving towards hydrogen. And
Well, they've fallen out of favor on Wall Street right now.
what's fallen out of favor?
PEVs, plug-in electric vehicles, for example, Faraday Futures is trading at 7 cents this morning per share. Their height was $1,350 2 years ago, okay? Fisker is in trouble on the Dow because on the New York Stock Exchange, you've got to at least maintain a $1 value in your stock, or you got to do something. You got to do a reverse split, or you got to do something. They're going through a reverse split right now. That's news that hit this week. There are people that do trucks like Workhorse, or even SUVs and things like that, like Canoe, that are all trading in the toilet right now, literally under $1, 30 cents, 20 cents, 17 cents, stuff like that, and 7 for Faraday. And my thinking on that when I look at it is that that's the fair weather friend scenario of Wall Street. I think what we've seen is it was all the rage a year ago, and it's gone away because demand has fallen by after a certain income level sort of said, okay, we've bought ours, but the general public's not buying them. Does that mean they're going away? No.
But the hybrid.
Does that mean that that's right, hybrids will be around until the infrastructure gets stronger?
And the hybrid with the electric PV together is really popular.
If you look at how lithium and nickel are being combined right now to address the battery cost issue, and cost is a big piece of that. You know, you've got Alaska now seeing mining opening up in areas that they never had before during oil exploration to lithium exploration. Yeah. And now you're looking at Indonesia, which is going to be experiencing substantial nickel mining investments. So it's not the golden goose.
Well, that was my
by all
point,
means,
though, is like.
But it's not going to go away.
Right, so like, but if hydrogen, then, you know, like, I guess Toyota and a couple of the places are looking at hydrogen, so.
Yeah.
By naming PEV, is there not a more generic or general, like, charging, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know.
I think it's ahead of the hydrogen and some of the other stuff.
But if this is like the district that never goes away, like, how do you keep it?
So we might be doing some other station, you know, in a text amendment in 10 years.
Okay,
We
so
don't
just
know.
text
And
amendment.
I also think that's where also the market's like, these companies pay to put these things here, they maintain them. If for some reason that ever happens, I could be wrong, but I don't think they're gonna just leave their equipment and stuff where if they're not being used, like, I think they would then be taken out and don't have to worry about them. Like, and we would have a text amendment, like, to that, like, all that would be taken care of.
I mean,
Now, keep in
I think
mind,
the
this is
word
for-
required is the one thing that just really bugs me for this. It's required, it says.
Now, this is a requirement in your non-residential parking lots. So
Right.
we're talking about a relatively small part of Marvin where I think it's actually a service to a lot of the residents that are here.
Right,
That
but it should be a option, and it's a decision by the council too, in reasonable ways.
They can't place a condition that is not agreed to.
Okay.
Now, they could say, you're not going to put any in, we're going to reject the whole rezoning, but that's the way it goes, kind of all or nothing.
Okay.
So I plugged in that roughly 10% rule, 1 in 10, okay, for those stations, because largely they're not a cost to the developer, other than some conduit.
And I want to add to, current form-based code does not have minimum parking standards.
Say it again?
The current form-based code does not have minimum parking allowances, like how many spaces are required outside of ADA. We are doing that now and implementing it through the parking standards in the new MDO. And we also, the language is added is that says the required minimum.
Yeah.
So, for example, if Fincher develops his property and is above the minimum, he doesn't have to put in 10% of how many parking he's providing. He's only got to do what the minimum is. And part of that is like,
That's right.
once again, and part of the reason we decided to go with parking standards is like, there's still going to be basically checks and balances, not when I say checks and balances, but like shared parking and certain things can be in the consideration, all that. But like, it kind of came up with the ZEPSA thing, and I know that was a conversation, and I still feel, they secured additional parking already, but, you know, I don't want that to be kind of an ongoing topic and somebody potentially front parking and then somebody get the benefit on not having to maybe do as much parking. So I think having those standards where we have min and max comes into play, and it's helpful. And so I just wanted to since that says that, I wanted to just clarify for you
I'm
guys.
also curious about if there is an area that is deemed public parking for pedestrians to park, or for people that come and park their vehicles and walk in the district area. Is this going to apply to that public parking area?
This would apply to any type of what I will call parking lot,
Okay.
okay? Within the Heritage District.
That's commercial.
Because this is the stuff that goes, that we've only been talking about the Heritage District, okay? This is, you know, there's other things, let's say you had something happen over on Highway 16, where our normal parking standards kicked in. If they've got drive-throughs, there's a couple of PEVs required, that's addressed in the parking stuff itself. If they have hotels, there's some PEV charging stations required as part of that. If you have something over on, for example, on 16, I don't think you're going to see that anywhere else in
But
town.
Circle K doesn't have a 1. Circle K, even though I said y'all
Well-
should have some PEVs there.
Madam Chair, my little saying for the longest time was that, you know, gas stations are going to not be the big charging station locations. You're not going to see it really take on there. I think it's going to be tied to food. And I don't know why Cracker Barrel hasn't jumped all over this, because people traveling pull in, plug in, go in and eat and come out. And so my little humorous point is that EVs are going to lead to an increase in obesity because people are going to come out after lunch. The car's not completely charged, so they're going to go back for dessert. And oh, but that, because if you think about it, when people travel, sometimes they stop, eat, and gas up at the same time. I'm going to get off this exit, buy gas, go next door and eat. Now they're going to get out, plug in, go in and eat, come out, unplug, or go back and get dessert. So that's, I wanted to introduce that to you tonight without torturing you. But I do have a topic I want to toss out on the table before we spend too much time in Article 8 until we get it a little further down the road, because I know we've got a joint meeting that we're hoping to be able to accomplish coming up next month. So I was going to ask you if you wanted to give me a few days to take this to the next level, okay, and reconvene again before your next regular or before the joint meeting to do any more work on this. I'm trying not to torture planning boards.
Yeah, but
But
we're
I
also
wanna give it
missing a lot of our members tonight, so.
Yeah, I mean, and from a staff level, Rick, I think even at the joint meet, even if we, because the joint meeting's in 2 weeks, I think it would be fine even if we just did it at the joint and kind of present it, because I know council's,
do it at the
I think
joint.
council's gonna have a lot of interest, especially in this, because I mean, the Heritage District themselves was, I mean, identified in their last 3 council serve, whatever, as like one of the top priorities. So I think if we just did it at the joint meeting, kind of more polished, what I will recommend from the board, especially the members that are here, you know, go home, you know, absorb this, and if there's, you know, questions, comments, feedback, feel free to email it to me, and I'll get it to Rick, and so we can have some of that stuff definitely polished off before the joint meeting in 2 weeks.
I'm trying not to rehash the whole Heritage District thing, but at the same time, I'm trying to make sure that what we move into the development ordinance is on solid footing, and what we move to the plan is on solid footing because of that sort of shift in what the role of the plan is and what the role of the ordinance is. More needs to be on the perspective before the rezoning, not after the rezoning. You follow me?
What's the planning, zoning, and subdivision administrator? Do we have
That's
one of
the-
those?
That's the term I use for that guy right there,
Oh,
because it covers all those things. He's called the planning and zoning director here. But-
says
and
photometric
that would
plan shall
not-
be required by the planning, zoning, and subdivision administrator. The planning and zoning.
Where do I have that?
Page 56, first blue highlight.
That probably tells me that I was trying to insert it in a hurry, and, because
You just
believe me, we were
forgot to
hammering on
delete.
this until yesterday, late in the day. What, page 56?
Page 56.
So, thank you. the planning, zoning, and subdivision administrator, the planning and, oh, yeah. That's making sure he's got planning in his title. No. Yeah, I'll double check those, and make sure that I don't have that anywhere else. That's where I was apparently replacing planning and zoning administrator with planning, zoning, and subdivision administrator. I did that with the find and replace tool.
And Rick, I don't, does the board have any questions or comments based off of like the permitted use chart? One, the permitted use chart is not updated with the Heritage District stuff.
Yeah,
That's
it's
that's
not
it.
paired up with that
But
yet.
was there anything from the last,
Say that again?
the tables? So one, just to clarify, the table will now have another column for the Heritage District. So we'll have, so it's all in one place. It's the same legal coverage that we've been kind of talking about. If it's not listed,
It's not in
We're
there
good.
yet.
but I know there were some conversations during the last meeting about the permitted use chart and certain things. Did you guys have a chance to review? Is there any questions, comments on that? We're still polishing through, but I wanted to check to see if there
Well,
was any.
there's one more change coming your way that I want to go ahead and
Are we,
tell you about.
is the roll? Perfect.
Yeah. The holding zone is really the ag district, but I think that we are going to adjust that. We've got a lot of residential here that is large lot, like 3 acres or whatever. And in looking at the standards that we can deal with, I think I want to convert this ag district to a rural residential district, hold that lot size at 2.5 acres minimum or something like that, and let that be your holding zone. And then if we've got any ag activities, like an equestrian facility or something like that, it can be a special use permit. That's what I do in the ag district now. And I don't think we need a straight ag district. We're not going to have a 600-acre,
Not at these
major
prices.
farm producing whatever, soybeans or something like that for years and years and years. So I think that we use the rural residential as kind of our fallback and protect that early on, and then it can progress towards a single family or some other district in the future if people go down that route on some of the vacant farms.
Could you have been here like a year ago?
Pardon me?
I just,
Did you say I should have been
I
here?
wish you had been
Oh,
here a year ago.
well,
Yeah.
Because now I'm being affected by this very thing, so.
No, and
I'm
that's,
catching up with you guys too. I have to really learn the values of a community, and it takes me time to do that,
And that's-
So I'm trying to hit the nail on the head now.
yeah,
anyway.
Rick and I talked about this before the meeting. In short, like, we have, neighborhoods like Meadowlark and Valhalla and Providence Estates, that they were these properties that, with the new SFR districts, that was kind of, in this limbo, and I didn't want to necessarily zone them. I mean, that's part of the reason we're creating multiple districts, is to kind of separate, having those versus your preserved type neighborhoods, Marvin Creek. And so we kind of got into it, and we're like, we were originally thinking about just doing a rural residential, but then it really just makes sense to do rural, just replace the agriculture with that rural residential, where then pretty much any property over 3-5 acres will be zoned that. Then that leads to the protections of the existing neighborhoods, but as well as any property that is large enough that wants to either even do a minor subdivision. They would have to comply and have 5 acres and meet the setbacks and all that stuff to be able to then create one additional lot, or they would have to go through a rezoning to do something greater than that. So that's the key, and that's what we've been discussing. That's our plan. Yeah, I wish it could have been done. I said this Tuesday night. I wish this all could have been done 2-3 years ago, but we're getting there.
And we'll still have the mini farm overlay that would apply to the rural residential, which means it doesn't change the number of units you have. It just means you could move them up to, and maybe preserve a larger area intact, if that's the theme. Like, let's say a 10-acre equestrian theme that could, instead of having 4 2.5-acre lots, maybe it's, what I've got in the mini farm overlay now is 50,000 square foot lots. So you would bring those 4 homes up and then keep the equestrian area. So you still only can do 4. You can just bring them more together and preserve maybe a larger, more usable equestrian area or something like that. So the mini
Kinda
farm
like that
overlay
one
tool
on
would still be in the
Joe
box.
Kerr, he's the former,
Are you talking about Elysian Fields?
oh, yes. Yes, that's what I was talking about, Elysian Fields, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's basically what they're doing, it
Or
looks
that
like-
was the kind of intent, yeah. It was
but it's like
floodplain, and
pasture,
it's still
though,
common
like
open space, but it would be kind of the same concept, yes.
And that would help them deal with floodplains too, since we don't want those lot lines on the residential home sites going into those areas anymore. Let that be the equestrian area, the pastures, things of that nature, tighten the houses up a little bit. But it's still, what's that, 50,000 square feet's about an acre and a fifth or something like that?
Well, I'll be honest, like, I was on a rant on Tuesday night about this very thing, and so I think this solution will be really great to preserve those lots, because if not, and, because I think those are also what kind of makes Marvin special, is all
Yeah.
these open rural, like either non-neighborhoods or lots, and if people start buying them up and cutting them up and putting 5 houses on them, we're not gonna be Marvin anymore,
Well,
so.
and that was always the intent with the ag district, but then what kind of made me start thinking more is that, like with those neighborhoods, I mean, they're specifically roughly about 4 to 5 acre tracts, and I'm seeing this happen over in Marvin Acres. I mean, it's there's no established HOA, it's just kind of is what it is, and so some people are purchasing those properties, and where the house sits, and they're creating an additional lot, and so that would cure some of this. I know Meadowlark, I mean, you guys have your HOA and you are active, but if that were never to be the case or something, then that also kind of protects you there too. So that's kind of,
Everybody's dead body in that neighborhood.
that's where this creates that extra layer of protection, especially for those existing, older neighborhoods, and sets us up, so.
Yeah, it's just too bad it didn't happen sooner.
Well, we can make it
Better
all
late than never.
retroactive.
Better late than never.
I wish we could make it all retroactive, but it doesn't
I
quite work
know,
that way.
I know. That's okay. I can be this is what will happen to you if we don't pass this.
All right, well, that's all I have for you tonight.
Thank you, Rick.
It's kind of getting, I think it's really coming together. It still looks like there's a lot going on with the colors that I put in these, but we'll clean that up fairly quickly now that I'm getting some feedback from you. I try to read the crowd a little bit, and I think I know quite well what I need to focus on. So from a coordination standpoint, I may or may not have a more enhanced set. I'd like to try to get the rural residential plugged in, a few things like that done, so when we get to the work session, the joint meeting, that we've already gotten some of those things that we're all nodding about behind us. So I'll try to get that done, and I'll try to get that to you a couple of days before the meeting at the latest.
That'll be fine. And just so you know, and planning board as well as that, I've already had a initial first round of meetings with council on this, trying to get them up to speed, having them review it. And that's where I think the joint meeting, and why I think Article 8, because obviously that's the meat, Article 8 with the permitted uses, the districts, and some of, variation or some aspects of other articles. But with that being said, council should be in theory kind of up to speed on this, and that will allow us to really kind of focus on Article 8 during that night. And I think it would be good for, to have both boards kind of participating, because I don't want to have council having, one idea and you guys as another. I want to be able to make it all work so then it doesn't have to keep going back and forth. And so the timeline that Rick and I kind of have talked about is that ideally we'll kind of have all this stuff fleshed out, and then by, I think, the April regular meeting for you guys will be basically the final complete draft of everything. And then, potentially then a May council adoption at that point. So, and it could be April council, but I think where we're headed and the changes that we're making, it ideally would be about May, and then we'll get this thing going. And once again, once this thing's adopted, I can already guarantee you that we're gonna have 2 or 3 rezonings right after that. So.
I'll be here on time as usual, probably 30 minutes ahead of the, it's a 6 o'clock joint meeting. How will the room be set up for that meeting? Will it be the council up here and the planning board out here as second-class citizens, or?
Bring those.
I'll have the planning board on one side, the council on the other.
And we
there'll
have
be
these
There'll be
tables.
2 pull-up tables with mics.
Okay, a couple of pull-up tables
It'll
and
look like the
everything.
prosecution and the defense.
So we'll, all right.
It'll be the buddy system,
So we'll
like
have the
every
chair
planning
and the mayor
board to
both up
a
there.
council member.
Or something.
Something like that, okay.
Depends on how good you
So,
are,
yeah, we'll
Will.
probably back that up,
You can get,
then
Okay.
have the two tables that we have.
We'll get it figured out.
Can we use the screen if we need to bring something up overhead?
Yes.
We can actually go up here with it and everything, so I'll bring that. I'll have resources on USB if that's
And you can also
satisfactory.
wirelessly connect to it as well.
Okay.
We have options.
Wirelessly connecting to it always gives me a little heartburn, as we experienced yesterday, when start moving faster than the wireless thing wants to talk to the screen, and the screen freezes and the laptop's somewhere else.
Yeah, we can get you set up though.
Maybe, okay. Fortunately, he had an HDMI. We had some at the office, I just didn't know where they were.
Oh, well, like I said, I always come prepared. I always carry an HDMI in my book bag. I don't know, you never know when you need it, and yesterday was a prime example.
Well, I look forward to seeing everyone in a couple of weeks on the
thank you, Rick.
5th.
Appreciate it.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Rick. Go get you some dinner.
Is there a planner's update?
Not really.
Okay.
I mean, like I said, this is the big ongoing project. Hey, we rush it, but no, this, like I said, all I ask is, please spend some time in this. I mean, this is, I know, Kelly, you and I have had conversations about the Heritage District in general and the form-based code and stuff prior to me, but this is a chance to fix some of those things and really have that input, as well as, like, I've been preaching. I mean, Rick, we got to this point, and I want to make sure it's done right. Because I think even though with the ZEPSA rezoning was a great product and it's going to be a very, high-quality development, there was stuff that I identified in the form-based code that was lacking that I didn't want to have an issue moving forward. And so we get that chance to kind of clean all that up, fix it all up, and like I said, leads to, more high-quality development that fits us and it's going to look good in the long run.
Yeah, I do think that Rick's yellow highlights and giving examples of how it could backfire, like, on us, like the language, is incredibly helpful, because we don't know.
Yeah.
Right? So, yeah, so this is great. So I don't believe we have any action items other than to review Section 8 in detail and the fold-out lists. My braces, I can't lists. So board member comments. Ken, guess what? You're number one.
I'm good, thanks.
All right. Will,
I'm fine. Appreciate Rick and Jim. It's very informative. Thank you.
John? No, we still feel like we're learning too.
You started from the beginning, kind of thing, and I feel like
Now, come back to me.
Okay.
John did bring up the fact that he's got, hearing aid, and your voice is kind of low, and he's wondering if there's anything that can be more clear.
I have a hard time hearing Hunter as well, so,
and I didn't know whether it's because you're right here and I'm getting your loud voice and the other voice.
He's not
he also
sure,
doesn't
but
articulate as well
it's-
as he
well,
could, so
I
we're
didn't
gonna
want to
send him to
say
speech,
that, but
speech therapy. We're gonna
Well,
work on
it's
your,
also,
we're gonna
it's
get your
just
voice warmed up.
sometimes just talking into the mic and where it's at and stuff, like,
I just thought I'd mention it because he was asking me. That's all.
Rick,
I was just asking because I figured it was just me,
No.
old
Um,
ears and screwed up stuff.
All right, so in conclusion, Hunter's a mumbler.
He's a mumbler. He's Mr. Mumbles. Yeah.
thanks, guys.
I think it
Thanks,
should be planning and, like that whole long thing and then, and mumbler. So, I have some friends who can help you fix it.
guys. So what?
Yeah.
Oh, my gosh, yes.
So is the village going to pay for his speech therapy?
Speech therapy. I can help him. I can help him. I used to work for a speech pathologist. Well, thank you guys. Again, this is a very different evening than Tuesday night, so I feel like we've, a lot of the issues that I've been having with the ordinances and the procedures are going to be, once Rick is done, is going to be very cleaned up and much more equitable to all residents. And, I can only just say I wish we could have gotten him sooner, but you guys did a great job just getting him here, so I appreciate that, and thank you guys for your work. So, other than that, can we get a motion to?
What do you want to see if Bob has anything?
Oh, Bob, sorry, Bob. He's been quiet. Sorry, Bob.
No problem. I mean, I think everything everybody has said, I think this is great. I'm looking forward to the joint meeting because I think, while, I've been a part of and you're all discussing what we have, I think it's really important, and I agree with you, Hunter, that having both the council and the planning board talk about 8, I think is going to be great. You'd be able to get feedback from all the way around. So anyway, all good.
Enjoy the snow.
I will. Thank you.
All right, now, can we get a motion? To adjourn? Second? All in favor? All right, thank you, everybody. We're adjourned. Have a good one, Bob.
Thanks, Bob.